We light our virtual chalice this morning with these words from Stephen Stock. We light this chalice to celebrate the inherent worth and dignity of every person, to reaffirm the historic pledge of liberal religion to seek that justice which transcends mere legality and moves toward the resolution of true equality, and to share that love which is ultimately beyond even our cherished reason, that love which unites us. Welcome, friends, to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Worcester's online Sunday morning worship service. We're glad that you've joined us virtually this morning. It's an act of love that we gather in this way during this time of pandemic response. We hope that this service gives you an opportunity to pause for a few minutes, to gather in community so that we might care for each other, take a moment to reflect on our own well-being, and discover opportunities for spiritual refreshment, even as we are at a personal distance. We gather this way at least through the fall. Throughout the next few weeks, our religious exploration program will be offering opportunities for children and youth to gather virtually as well. Please visit www.uucworcester.org for more information on these get-togethers, as well as other opportunities to meet for discussion and support. For safety purposes, and so that we might come to know you better, as you are able, please list your name on your video feed. Please note that this service is being live streamed over Facebook and is being recorded and will be available on the church YouTube channel and on our website in the coming days. Following this service, There you are invited to join us for a time of virtual fellowship. Thank you and welcome. Our opening words this morning are by my colleague, Maureen Killoran. In this free church, we come together without creed, focusing instead on the core values of justice, equity, and compassion, of mutual acceptance of our diverse ways of being as we seek to connect ourselves more fully with the unfolding truths of life and of our world. We come together in shared conviction that all people deserve a voice in matters that concern them, and that it is up to each of us to protect the rights of all, particularly those who, for whatever reason, have long been held in silence. We come together in the stubborn belief that community is possible and that peace is more than a dream. We commit together to affirm in our actions as well as our words the inherent worth and dignity of every person. We come together in awareness of our interdependence with all humanity and with the wider web of existence, for that too is part of what is meant by we. In this free church, we come together without creed, believing that the way we live in the world bears testament to the value of our beliefs. Are you able to see the screen before you that is primarily black?
For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. Oh, for each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. Oh, for each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings, and we are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are mothers of courage, fathers of time, daughters of dust, and the sons of great visions. We're sisters of mercy, brothers of love, lovers of life, and the builders of nations. We're seekers of truth, keepers of faith, makers of peace, and the wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers. We are our grandfather's dreamings, and we are the breath of our the stars of time, the rabbits of dust, and the sons of great visions, the birds of mercy, brothers of love, lovers of life, and the builders of nations. We're seekers of truth and keepers of faith. We are makers of peace and the wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers. We are our grandfather's dreamings, and we are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. We are one.
I want to invite us into a moment when we hear from Robin Mickiewicz, our Religious Exploration Director, about what kinds of things are going on these days in our religious exploration moment. Robin.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. I just am fresh off of a 9 a.m. coming of age graduation service that was put together by Vicki Cox Lanyon and all of our coming of age teens. We graduated 11 this morning from our program, which is a program of mentored learning. The teens are paired with adult mentors from our congregation and go through a year's worth of self-reflection, mentored learning, group bonding, and outreach projects and fun. And at the end, they are asked to state their beliefs to their community, which they did this morning. They answer questions like, who am I and what do I believe? What do I care about in this world? What I stand for and what I stand up for. It was a really beautiful service. And I just would like to name the kids that graduated this morning in no particular order. They are Patrick Schumann, Lucy Billier, Simone Billier, Nate Turner Clark, Sierra Durr, Davin McGrath, Ellie Esposito, Elizabeth Johnson Erickson, Timothy Showalter, Christopher Murillo, and Justin Keogh. Today at 1 o'clock, our RE families are meeting in front of our church. We are kicking off a clay project called Little Light of Mine, and we will have a blessing of the clay, and each family will have kits to bring home and make their own clay, which our own Jesse Trowbridge, who is a potter, will fire so everybody can have their RE at home altar. And this evening we meet live in the backyard with masks and socially distanced beach chairs with our youth group. And we hope to do that every week until the snow flies. Thank you.
Robin, thank you so much for all that you do and for all that the Religious Exploration Program continues to offer us. Our reading this morning comes from the book, The Dignity of Difference by Rabbi Jonathan Sacks. Danger arises any social transformation when one institution exceeds its proper bounds and colonizes areas that have a different logic or dynamic. There were times, the Middle Ages, when this was true of religion. In the 18th century, it became true of science. In the 19th and 20th centuries, it was true of politics. In the 21st century, it has become true of the market. Money exchange is an appropriate mechanism for some transactions, but not all. Society depends on the existence of certain relationships that stand outside economic calculation. Among them, families, communities, congregations, and voluntary associations. These are the institutions of civil society, and they have become seriously eroded in consumption-driven cultures. Under conditions of maximal uncertainty, we are best guided by relatively simple moral principles. I call them control, contribution, creativity, cooperation, compassion, and conservation, and suggest that these six C's are a prelude to the seventh, which is conciliation, a new global covenant of human solidarity. My own view, it is a religious one, but one does not have to be religious to share it, is that economic systems are to be judged by their impact on human dignity. An order that systematically deprives a significant portion of humankind of fundamental dignities is indefensible. That does not mean abandoning the global market, but it does mean taking seriously a set of non-market values which must be factored into our decisions about the future. I want to invite Beth Posner-Waldron to share with us about this morning's 50/50 collection for the UUCW Get Out the Vote team. Beth.
Hey, thank you, and good morning, everybody. So if you haven't been seeing news about our group, just want to let you know, this started with the germ of an idea in a Side with Love meeting about 3 or 4 years ago, when we recognized that the outcome of the next election would probably come down to the battleground states. And Ruth and I were like, hey, you want to go to North Carolina and help register voters? And then reality hit as we got closer, and that meant no. We're not going to North Carolina, but we realized that we could reach voters in North Carolina with phone banking and postcards and letters, and other states as well. And we started meeting in June, and there's a handful of us that started getting together. I believe many of them are worshiping with us this morning. And if you go to the next slide, you can see some of the groups that we came up with when we started doing vetting of nonpartisan organizations. With a variety of ways that we can reach people, whether through phone banking or texting, postcards, letter writing. We found that phone banking is one of the most effective ways to reach people. It's second best to canvassing door to door and providing in all of these ways information so that people who need to know how to be registered and how to vote safely can get this information. On a personal level, every day, I find one more reason to be, we found that or depressed. If you go to the next slide, Aaron, I'll just keep talking. And, we've got a leadership that thinks that the way to calm us is to play down the truth about a deadly virus that now keeps us from worshiping together. Or even if we were together, we'd have to sit so far apart. We can't sing hymns, we can't hug or even shake hands. I can't have Thanksgiving with my extended family at my house because then I have to worry, well, who's been exposed to who? What are we spreading when we sit down to dinner? I know that Rowan is going to be going to school, my third grade grandson. I'm going to have to start wearing a mask when I'm around him. We also have leadership that doesn't believe in the science about climate change and the cause of increasing wildfires. And my family in Denver, the kids know, well, they got to wear a mask when they're around people. But some days, just because of the air quality, they have to wear a mask in their backyards because of the fires burning in the Rocky Mountains. Or some days they have ash falling and they can't go outside. And now we've got our heroine, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who's passed away. And that leaves the possibility that her seat is going to be filled by someone that's going to take away women's reproductive freedom. And this is how I fight racism. This is how I help empower people of color who are disproportionately impacted by police actions, our judicial system, by the coronavirus that because of health disparities makes them more vulnerable to this disease. And this is how I fight voter suppression. So, you know, some of you may be feeling the same way. You may be upset about some of these things. You may be wondering, what can you do? Well, you can put your faith into action. On September 30th, we have an opportunity for you to join us to do phone banking with the UUA. If Aaron goes to the next slide, we're going to be making phone calls. The UUA's goal with UU the Vote is to help reach 1 million voters by phone by election day. And we've got an opportunity for calling the state of Wisconsin to help people check their registration status and give them the information that they need so that they can be registered and so that they can vote safely. So I hope that many of you will join us. It's not enough for just the people on our team, as we call ourselves, to be making these phone calls. And the other thing you can do is to donate to our stamp fund. And Erin is going to tell you how to do that. So thank you for listening to me. I really welcome that opportunity.
Thank you very much, Beth. Our 50/50 collection will be taken up as a part of our offering today. The money that is received either by texting your offering to 508-231-5335 or by visiting www.uucworcester.org/donate will be split 50/50 between the Siding with Love Fund, which is funding the stamp project for the UUCW Get Out the Vote team, and the congregation. So I invite you to contribute in a way that helps you feel like you too are making a difference, not only in the effort that is before us today, a very important one with Get Out the Vote, but also with the continuing ministry and missions of this congregation, which Get Out the Vote is one. At this time, our morning offering will be received. We come once again to that time in our service when we are given pause to consider that which is most importantly in our hearts or in our minds or in the work of our hands in the days that have transpired or the prospect of days to come. Joys and sorrows that touch us deeply and are given another measure of meaning because of our capacity to share them in the midst of a company that claims us as a co-journeyer. So I invite those of you who have joys or sorrows this morning to either raise your virtual hand or open your microphone. And for those of you who are following us on Facebook Live, if you have a joy or sorrow to share, you're welcome to put it in the comments there as well. Please be mindful that we are streaming on Facebook Live, and I invite you now to share what is deepest in you. Let's see. I want to call on Diane Mann.
Thank you, Aaron. We had a great joy yesterday at the Loaves and Fishes Food Pantry. It takes a village to raise a food pantry. And I want to present this to the entire congregation. The pantry turned 25 years yesterday. It began down the road at St. John's Episcopal Church. And then when that church closed, we took it over 10 years ago. And this is on behalf of all your efforts, because I see lots of names that over the years have helped us do this. So Aaron, can people see this? Oh, I can't hear you. So the certificate of recognition was presented to us on September 19th, which was yesterday, by Jean McMurray, the CEO of the Worcester County Food Bank. Presented to the Loaves and Fishes Food Pantry for 25 years of services as a food pantry serving Worcester, Massachusetts. Worcester County Food Bank values the work of Loaves and Fishes as an organization that prioritizes healthy food, advocacy, and serving the community. There were a couple of food pantries, to my knowledge, that within the city or the county had to quit or made a decision not to continue services during the pandemic. And we have been able to continue doing that in a much different way. And I appreciate everyone's help and thank all our co-leaders and Betsy Wood for bringing this mission to our church.
Diane, thank you so much. And congratulations to all of our food pantry volunteers, our food pantry task force, everyone who's put their heart and their soul and their energy into making certain that those who face hunger and food insecurity in our area of the city and across our city go home with food and find ways to connect deeply with each other in the community that continues to love and serve them. Jenny Delgizzi.
Hi, everybody. I have a few things to say, and Diane mentioned one of them. I enjoy working with the food pantry quite a bit. It's one of my favorite things that I get to do in my life. It's just a wonderful mission, and I'm just so proud of Betsy and Diane for all their hard work, and everyone. There's so many hands make light work, so they say. I get my steps in on Friday night of food pantry night. Also, we had our COA graduation, and I just want to mention how proud I am of all the youth that graduated today. And I want to thank all the mentors for their hard work with the kids and the youth. And Robin, of course, our wonderful fearless leader of our program. Thank you, everyone. And Vicki put together such a wonderful service. It was just wonderful. And then lastly, my own Joe Delgizzi, my spouse, his birthday is today, and our anniversary, yep, 24 years. Yep, we've been a couple for 25 years, but we've been married 24. So it's a fun weekend for us over here at the Delgizzi household. And thank you guys for being part of it.
Thank you so much. I want to recognize Mary Lane Merriam, who writes, "My joy, my mom is watching the service today from Maine, and I'm so happy." And Jane Richards Picard writes, "Thankful to be watching this service from Georgetown with my children." Bill Durr.
Hi, I'm an optometrist for those of you who don't know, and I was permanently laid off in March, and I finally found a job a few weeks ago working over at the Lens Crafters in the Solomon Pond Mall. So very excited about that, and I'm hoping that all the people who are laid off, that hopefully eventually they'll get some more aid, and because I know that it's a tough situation with that right now for most people stuck in that position.
Thank you so much, Bill. Let's see. I'm looking at, let's see. Beth is grateful to be joining from Bow Lake, New Hampshire. And Melissa McKean writes, "Happy birthday to Joe and happy anniversary to both of you." Good luck on the job, Bill. Congratulations. Are there other joys or sorrows to be shared this day? I don't see Andrea Cruz on here this morning, but those of you who follow her on Facebook know that Andrea welcomed her son Victor into the world this week. He was born 4.5 pounds, I think 18 inches long, if I remember correctly. I could be wrong about that. I understand that everyone is doing fine, and I know that her husband, William, tomorrow will be going for his citizenship appointment. So we send our love and our support to Andrea and William and Victor, and to Lynn Gustia and David Williams, proud grandparents, that everyone, this is such a wonderful time of the beginnings and new beginnings. And we're so grateful for your presence with us. Let us be in the spirit of prayer and meditation. O Holy One, we come to this season with much in our hearts. Grateful this day for the continuing work of those in our community who strive to stave off the effects and reality of hunger and food insecurity. For those who founded the Loaves and Fishes Food Pantry 25 years ago, for those who continue to sustain it in our midst, and for all of the volunteers that give so much of themselves so that people in our neighborhood and in our community might find deeper connection with each other, with the friends of this congregation, and with those who can provide what is necessary for one's very survival. We're mindful this day also of the passing of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. May we draw inspiration from her life, honor her moving forward in memory, that we too might work for more justice in the world, to speak truth to power, to use the power we have with compassion, and to honor all that is yet to become by being true to the values which draw us closer together as a human family. We're also grateful this day for new beginnings, for new jobs, for the celebration of a journey toward coming of age, and for all of those who companion our youth into an awareness of their potential and their future. We give great thanks this day for this community, as we continue to strive to find ways to meaningfully serve the world that we live in, and to craft it into a more peaceful place with the work of teams like Get Out the Vote and our anti-racism team, a religious exploration program, and so many other things that are done in the name of justice and wholeness and peace, individually and as a community. Help us be mindful of the privilege of our service and the continuing call that we create more of what we value in days, months, and years to come. Amen, and blessed be. So I want to start this morning with the Tower of Babel story out of the book of Genesis, chapter 11, verses 1 through 9. Now the whole earth had one language and the same words, and as they migrated from the east, they came upon a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there. And they said to one another, "Come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly." And they had brick for stone and bitumen for mortar. And then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens. And let us make a name for ourselves, otherwise we should be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth." The Lord came down to see the city and the tower which mortals have built. And the Lord said, "Look, they are one people, and they have all one language, and this is only the beginning of what they will do. Nothing that they propose to do will now be impossible to them. Come, let us go down and confuse their language, so that they will not understand one another's speech." So the Lord scattered them abroad from there over the face of the earth, and they left off the building the city. Therefore it was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of all the earth, and from there the Lord scattered them abroad over the face of the earth. Today's reflection is very much centered in the thoughts of Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, who was the chief rabbi in the United Kingdom from 1991 through 2013, especially his book, The Dignity of Difference, which was born out of reflections following the attacks of 9/11, 2001. In commenting on that book, Rabbi Sacks writes, "Most of us know the book of Genesis so well that we take it for granted. We don't always see how strange the story is." One of the interesting asides, by the way, that I find most fascinating by the Tower of Babel is that one of the midrashes about the Tower of Babel is that the tower was not destroyed because humankind sought more to be like God. But the tower was destroyed because during its building, bricks became more important than human beings. Human beings could climb ladders to the top of this very tall tower. Carrying bricks to the top, however, took lots of effort. When a brick fell, it was considered more of a tragedy than when a person fell, because persons could be replaced more easily. It is the very logic of this particular kind of midrash that I think permeates much of what Rabbi Sacks has to say. He continues, "What are the opening chapters of Genesis 1 to 11 about? They're about the creation of the universe and humanity as a whole. Its figures are archetypical and its stories are paradigmatic. There's Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, Noah and the flood, Babel and the tower. They're all about humanity as a whole. In Genesis 9, God makes a covenant with humanity as a whole, and that is the covenant that we, in Judaism, he writes, calls the Noetic covenant. But in Genesis 12, the focus of the story changes. The focus shifts from humanity as a whole to one man, Abraham, one woman, Sarah, and their children. who become a family, who become a tribe, who become 12 tribes, who become a nation. And what is very interesting about the Bible is that the members of the nation, the bearers of the covenant, are not the only people to know God. It's like the very famous American advertising slogan. He writes, "You don't have to be Jewish to enjoy Levi rye bread." I find it absolutely fascinating that in the Bible, you don't have to be Jewish to know the divine. So let's take some examples, beginning with Abraham's contemporary Malachi, about whom the Bible says he was a priest of the Most High God, but he was not a member of the Abrahamic covenant. God appears to Joseph's Pharaoh, and Pharaoh knows the divine. And Moses' father-in-law, who was not an Israelite, Jethro, was considered the most righteous man in the Hebrew Bible. And who was considered the most righteous man in the Hebrew Bible? Job, who was not, in fact, of the Hebrew people. Job, he writes, brings the whole human story to closure because it's the last time in the Hebrew Bible that the divine speaks directly to human beings. And so Job is closure of the human story, and Adam is the beginning. Adam is a man who has everything and yet sins. Job is a man who loses everything and yet stays in conversation with the divine. Job is a kind of everyman. So this extraordinary claim in the Bible that you don't have to be Jewish to find the divine, and yet the Hebrew Bible is overwhelmingly about one nation. Thus we have a paradox. Rabbi Sachs asks what's going on here, and he proposes in his book, The Dignity with Difference, that Western civilization is based on two sources. One is from ancient Greece, the other from the Hebraic tradition, ancient Israel. He writes, Matthew Arnold called these Hellenism and Hebraism, two great cultures that were completely different. Ancient Greece, the birthplace of philosophy, people like Socrates and Plato and Aristotle. Ancient Israel, the birthplace of prophecy, the people like Abraham and Moses, Elijah and Elisha, Isaiah and Jeremiah. And these two particular sources, these two particular ways of being in the world come together in the tradition of Christianity. What might we draw as distinctions between these two traditions? Well, according to Rabbi Sachs, they're fundamental. We can see this, he writes, in the most famous passage of the Greek philosophy. It was Alfred North Whitehead that said that Western philosophy is a series of footnotes on Plato. And in the most famous passage of Plato, the parable of the cave and the dialogue of the Republic, Plato asks, how in a world of appearances and change can we ever come to know true knowledge, the knowledge that is deeper than appearance, the truth that is eternal and does not change? Plato answered that, it is indeed what Western thought has been fundamentally based upon, is the true knowledge comes when you move from the particular to the universal, from the local to the global, or as Rabbi Sachs writes, from the parochial to the cosmopolitan. We begin with narrow loves, he writes. The love of our parents, our family, our friends, and our neighbors, and then the people to the town, and then the people of the nation, and then the people of the world. Civilization is a journey from particular to universal. When we begin to understand the trajectory of Western philosophy from the particular to the universal, we begin to understand what is unique about the story that we find in Genesis, which begins with the universal, with Adam and Eve and humanity as a whole, and then in chapter 12 moves very directly into the individual. It moves to Abraham and Sarah and their children. It is the exact opposite of Platonic thought. It is what Rabbi Sachs refers to as the counter-Platonic narrative. The question is why, and the obvious place for the answer, writes Sachs, is in the passage immediately before God's call for Abraham to leave his land, his birthplace, which precedes the passage that we just heard in chapter 11, the story of Babel. This moment of creating a city and a tower begins with a very interesting phrase. The whole world was one language and one shared vocabulary. The whole world was in a state of unity, he writes. And he continues, and the question is, what's wrong with that? And it's here that Rabbi Sachs, in writing his book, relies on the remarkable interpretation that's given by the great Jewish scholars of the 19th century, Netzev, Rabbi Naftali, Zai Yehuda, Berlin, who said an extraordinary thing. He said Babel was the first totalitarianism. It was the first place that had no room for difference. And what's fascinating about this, he writes, is that Netzev was echoing Aristotle's critique of Plato's Republic. Aristotle said that the unity proposed in Plato's Republic can't be free society. It's not the polis. It's exactly the point made by the Jewish thinker of the 20th century, Karl Popper, in his book, The Open Society. Popper says, following Aristotle, that Plato's Republic, beautiful though it is an imposed unity, a totalitarianism. What Sachs does from here is to move on to ask, what can we learn from the juxtaposition between these two ways of understanding ourselves and the world, moving from the universal to the particular and moving from the particular to the universal? He writes, totalitarianism is an attempt to impose unity on society in a way that crushes and forbids human difference. He thinks about this also in terms of religious fundamentalism. He defines religious fundamentalism as an attempt to impose a single truth on a plural world. And that is why the divine responds in Babel by creating a multiplicity of languages and hence a multiplicity of cultures and civilizations. That's why the key movement in the Bible is from universality to particularity. That's why the beating heart of monotheism is the miracle that unity up there creates diversity down here. And the rabbis in the 2nd century, he writes in a document called Midrash, or Mishnah, in chapter 4 of the Sanhedrin, says so beautifully, when a human being mints many coins in the same mint, they all come out exactly the same. But when God makes every human being in the same mint and in the same image, his image, we all come out different. And that's the point that Genesis is trying to make. If we read Genesis and the other books, Mosaic books, if you will, we find a very strange phenomenon, according to Sachs. You know the biblical command, you shall love your neighbor as yourself? Do you know how many times it appears in the Hebrew Bible? You shall love your neighbor as yourself. It appears in Leviticus chapter 19, verse 18, and it appears only once. But then when you go on to look for statements that are like, you shall love your neighbor as yourself, you find this, and he counted them. The Bible commands us in one place to love our neighbor, but in 36 places, he writes, it commands us to love the stranger. Why, he asks, does it tell us 36 times to love the stranger? Because it is much harder to love the stranger than your neighbor. And now, he says, we begin to understand immediately after the story of the Tower of Babel, the attempt to impose artificial unity, if you will, on human diversity, that the story of the start of the Abrahamic journey begins. with the particular. In this moment in time, in the culture that we share and in all of the challenges that we face, I think this question of where do we put our authority and truth and how do we live it out is paramount. I think about this experience of pandemic in particular, how it is an experience that has spread across the globe and is very much a part of the story of every culture on Earth. And yet the experience of pandemic, for the most part, is a very personal one. We are drawn back into ourselves. We are literally isolated because of the pandemic from each other, drawn into our own fears, our own discomfort, the challenge of ways of being that are potentially particularly foreign to us given the ways that we've been in the world. And that experience can do one of two things. They follow the paths and the trajectories that Rabbi Sachs describes between the Platonic and the biblical or the Mosaic image of the progression of humankind. That drawing into ourselves can cause us to favor isolation, to build walls, if you will, to call for more of the same, to begin to only commune with those that are closest to us because that's what we're forced to do in the moment, but then to fear the possibility of communing in larger measures, even as we all crave the opportunity to do that. That is actually the basis of fundamentalisms, political fundamentalism, religious fundamentalism, nationalism, isolationism in general. The experience of pandemic can also, by virtue of drawing us into ourselves, awaken in us a profound sense of the other, to have a sense that we have work to do in the community to make certain that not only are we safe, but others are safe. That's why the question of whether wearing a mask or not wearing a mask is so much a part of the juxtaposition between these two worldviews. This isn't a matter of individual right and freedom of the individual to do what is right, or is it also a part of what it means to participate in community, to don a mask not just to protect myself, but as a measure of my solidarity with everyone else to provide protection for as many as possible. We are grounded in this moment, in this juxtaposition between these two worlds, literally, that Rabbi Sachs is outlining in his book, The Dignity of Difference. He continues, why did God tell Abraham to be different? And he's talking here about the first time that we are introduced to Abraham in Genesis 11. He recounts what is said in that moment. Abraham, it says, leave your land, leave your birthplace, leave your father's house, leave all the places where everyone is like you and travel to an unknown destination. Become a stranger in a strange land. Go and live a life that is different from the people around you, different from the way of the Mesopotamians live, different from the way the Egyptians live, different from the way your neighbors, the Canaanites and the Hittites live. Go and be different. Why the commandment to be different? Sachs writes, it was to teach all humanity the dignity of difference. He continues, and friends, we now know, thanks to the entire environmental movement and thanks to Al Gore, may he win many more prizes, that our entire ecology depends on biodiversity, and any loss of that diversity can be incalculable consequences. Cut down the rainforests and you get global warming. We know now, thanks to Crick and Watson, the discovery of DNA, and Craig Ventnor, and the decoding of the human genome, that in every one of the 100 trillion cells in the human body is a double copy of the human genome, each which contains 3.1 billion letters of genetic code, which, if transcribed, will fill a library of 5,000 books. And that is why every one of us is different. Every one of those letters makes us somehow unique. Every genetic twins, even genetic twins, he notes, are only alike in 50% of their features. There is no such thing as sameness in humanity because the divine cherishes uniqueness. Universality is where we begin, but particularity is where we each reach our greatness and our uniqueness and what human culture would be if there was only one language, and what would human culture be if there was only one language, only one culture, only one way to dress, only one cuisine. I think this is the question that is at the heart of our efforts. Our efforts to honor the symbols that on our sanctuary, they're not just symbolic of different religions, they're symbolic of orientations toward life that are fundamentally distinct. And yet, by communing together and drawing together people who find value, who find their truth in a variety of ways, we begin to demonstrate how it is that we can get along ultimately in a world that continues to struggle between the forces of totalitarianism and isolationism and me first, to the forces that begin with the experience of the individual and encourage us to grow in our relatedness and our connectedness to each other and the world around us. I would finish our time this morning, or my reflection this morning, by quoting Sachs again. He writes, "What I've tried to sketch in the most brief and broad brush strokes is a theology of diversity, the Abrahamic message which I decode as the dignity of difference." And then he says this, "Only religion is strong enough to bring peace between religions, and if religion is a part of the problem, for the sake of heaven, let us make it part of the solution. Let us have the courage in the 21st century to heal those ancient rifts between Judaism and Christianity and Islam, because that is what we are being called to do. The hour is late, the challenge is great. Let us have the courage to stretch out the hand of friendship across the boundaries between faiths and turn strangers. Love your strangers. Love that which is strange. To turn strangers into friends." Amen. And blessed be. I invite you to join together in this litany by Jean M. Ricard. We have a calling in this world. And please simply repeat the words in bold as I share with you the unbolded text. We have a calling in this world.
We are called to honor diversity,
to respect differences with dignity,
And to punish those who would forbid it.
We are people of a wide path.
let us
be wide
in affection and go
our way
in
in peace. Our closing hymn this morning is "There is More Love Somewhere." Please join in singing as you are willing and able.
There is more love somewhere. There is more love somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more love.
Our closing words are by my colleague, Rebecca A. Edmonston Lang. Mindful of our highest aspirations, bound by common faith and purpose, and yet beginning with ourselves as we are, let us take one more step together in our unending quest for dignity, justice, and love. Amen.
Amen.